time that we've worked together, but I very much like the opportunity to do assessments with people because we can look at the actual data, we can look at the performance in real time, and then we can answer that question very, very explicitly. Is there active movement under basal conditions with no assistance? What's the passive range of motion? And what happens when we provide a little bit of assistance? Do we get any amplification of that movement?
Hey everyone, my name is Dr. Nick Halsey with Motus Nova. I'm a licensed neurophysical therapist and neuroscientist helping brain injury survivors understand how to make functional gains after their injury. I hope this video helps you in your recovery.
Jack and Wanda. So Navita, we will move over to you in just a second, but I'm going to start with Jack and Wanda. Can you guys hear me okay? Understood. Is it Wanda?
Yes.
Great. Well, it's so great to meet you guys. And thanks for asking how I am. I'm doing okay so far. I'm still upright, so I'll take it. Since this is our first time chatting, I always like to get to know you guys a little bit. So would you mind just telling me kind of who you are, where you're calling from?
We're down in Houston area. This is my mother, Wanda. She's 74 years old. She had a stroke last July. And it on the right side of her brain, left the left side of her body flaccid, her left arm and left leg. I guess it was about February. We'd been doing a lot of rehab at home. We now have her in a memory care facility that where she stays and gets the care and attention that she needs on a daily basis. But I visit every day and do the therapy with her. We started it in February. It's been really good for what I'll call range of motion, keeps her arm from getting real stiff. But we haven't seen a whole lot of, I guess, progress with her being able to move it on command. She actually can move her leg on command. She can push with her leg and her foot, but the arm, she's not really seen any real progress with. And so the biggest advantage we found in using the Motus Nova arm device is it really does, the range of motion exercises really do help her with the stiffness, and that helps with pain. You know, a lot of times when that arm gets stiff, she feels a lot of pain that resonates up her arm and into her shoulder and neck sometimes. That's been our.
And that can make even sleep be a problem, because if you're in pain, it's really hard to get good rest, and that kind of compounds. So
you know, prior to the stroke, she was, you know, very independent, lived by herself, did everything on her own. You know, did a lot of church functions and things, and you know, this is the stroke has been pretty debilitating for her. So yeah, we'd love to see progress. It's been over a year now, so you know, we're still hopeful, you know, that things will get better.
Sure. And with respect to the early care following the stroke, walk me through a little bit of that process. How did that go for you guys? So,
of course, the stroke happened during COVID. I didn't know she was having a stroke. I visited her one evening to check on her because she had been exposed but had not been tested positive. So I was checking on her daily to make sure she was okay. And I checked on her one evening before she went to bed, and then forgot to leave her some copies of some papers for her Bible study. So the next morning, about 10 a.m., I went back, and when I went to visit her, she wasn't up. She was not in. I couldn't hear her. And then, as I was leaving the papers in the kitchen, I could hear her voice yelling my name, and I went into her bedroom, and she wasn't in bed. She was laying on the floor in the bathroom. So she had, at some point in the middle of the night, got up to go to the restroom and had slipped down to the floor. I picked her up, took her to her bed, and she slept for another couple of hours. And then when she woke up, she tried to get out of bed to go to the bathroom, and she fell to the floor.
Okay.
We ended up getting an ambulance to come, and they took her to the emergency room, and they said they had done a CAT scan. She had blockage in the right side of her brain. They were going to give her some medication and keep her in the hospital. And at some point over the next 3 days, of course, we couldn't visit. We couldn't be there. We were just talking to people on the phone. They found that her carotid artery on her right side was, I forget what the percentage was. It was almost blocked. So they went in and did a procedure to clean it out. Prior to that procedure, she was, her speech was slurred. They were telling me in the hospital, she was able to get up and go to the bathroom with a walker. Now, prior to the stroke, she didn't have a walker or anything. After that procedure, she, I think, became worse. Her speech became more slurred. She was no longer able to get up and with a walker. So then we started this long process of, they put her in the rehabilitation part of the hospital. And they allowed me and my sister to come up and participate in the rehab every day. It was an hour and a half of physical therapy, hour and a half of occupational therapy, and then I think it was a half hour of speech therapy every day. And that was for a good part of 2 or 3 weeks, I think. And then her insurance said that she had to go to a skilled nursing facility. We were not allowed in there because of COVID and didn't get to participate in any of the rehab. So I'm not real sure what happened during those weeks, but I felt like she was getting worse, not better, based on, you know, being there every day during the hospital, not being there during the skilled nursing. So we decided to bring her home. We hired private caregivers, and our whole purpose at that point was to really focus on the therapy, because they said that those first 90 days or 60 days was critical. We ended up having a lot of other problems. She got a UTI, ended up having a lot of diarrhea, and then got dehydrated, and then ended up drinking too many liquids. So she ended up with low sodium, had to go back in the hospital, all sorts of things that really prevented us from doing what I would have considered like hardcore therapy. So we had to take her back to the hospital. She stayed in the hospital for about 3 weeks, ended up with C. diff and other things, finally got all that taken care of. And that's when we ended up here at the memory care facility.
Memory care.
Yeah, we just couldn't do what we needed to at home to take care of her.
Sure.
And so that was the point, like in January, where I thought we got to find another way. And I heard about the Motus Nova, actually, I think on maybe a radio station or something. And so I felt like it would have been a good investment at that point. She continues to have physical therapy once or twice a week from the home health agency here. They come in and do some things with her. And then my sister and I come in every day and try to do a little bit with the Motus Nova device.
Hey, if you're finding this video helpful, please hit like and subscribe to help other brain injury survivors learn how Motus Nova is changing neuro-rehab.
Well, that's great background. So thanks for that. It's always good to have some insight. And Wanda, it sounds like you have been through a lot in the last, let's say, 18 months. So glad you're here with me today. And my main goal is, and my main goal is to be as helpful as I can for you guys, to answer any questions you have, and see what we can do to help you have the sort of maximum recovery that you can have. So with that being said, I always like to start off with, are there any sort of burning questions that I can help answer right now? And then we can go through various elements of doing assessments, answering more questions. I really like to have you guys kind of direct the ship, because I can kind of be a reservoir of information for you.
Okay.
And I will also say this, don't feel like this is our last chance of working together. We can, of course, work together. I much prefer to work regularly with people, because that means that we can touch base and we can kind of work together and make modifications as needed. So with that, I'm going to shut up and just say, what kind of questions can I help answer for you?
Yeah, I'm an engineer by trade. I work at NASA, and
Sure.
so I look at data, and I've been looking at the data
Sure.
that it's fascinating to me. The range of motion data, I think there's some force data as well.
Yeah.
And I've been trying to correlate the data with what I'm seeing with her progress. The range of motion, I don't know if that is a setting with the device, but I have noticed over time it will move her hand further up and down with some of the, you know, the sessions that she goes through. And I think this motion or this plot definitely is indicative of that. You know, over time since February, we've seen a lot more range of motion, and that's been good for her. That's been really good. What I struggled to detect is, you know, I'll sit beside her during the sessions and encourage her to try to move her hand, you know, look at it and focus on it and try to move it as the, you know, as she's watching the game or whatever she's playing. And she'll look at it and you can see her, you know, lips will start moving. She's trying, and we don't really see much movement. And I wonder, on that force plot, is there any indication that we're getting anything out of that? Now, there are times when the device, I'm going to kind of move this over so you can see how we have.
Yeah. That's a good view. That's a good view. Yeah. Actually, guys, Jack, I'm not able to hear you anymore for some reason. I don't know what happened. Maybe it's a directional mic or.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Boy, I'm not sure what happened. I'll try that again. Yeah. Let me know if you can't hear me.
Okay, still good. I can still maybe do a test here.
Okay. Can you still hear me? I don't know if you could hear me when I did that, but can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Yeah, I could not hear you when you rotated the camera. Really strange. Okay.
I don't know why. So when the device slips off, sometimes she'll yawn and her arm will kind of involuntarily move and it'll fall to her leg. And I wonder if some of the forces that we're seeing on this plot could be induced by it falling on her leg or whatever. But I did notice there's a trend here. Over time, there is an increase in the force in both directions. So is this an indication that maybe there is some movement on her part that we're just not able to detect? It may be imperceptible.
Yeah. I think this is always the tough situation to be in, where we're kind of, you can imagine function as being kind of steps, right? Where you have to go from basically, for instance, there's a point at which I am not able to lift this cup, and then suddenly I can do that task. And there's a lot of things that have to happen in order for me to do that task. For instance, I have to get the right aperture of my hand. I have to coordinate all the limb joints, get the right trajectories and all these things. And if any one of those things goes wrong, I will fail the task.
Right.
And motor function is very much the same way. In fact, it is exactly the same thing, except we're just sort of boiling it down. And there's a lot of prerequisites that have to happen in order for us to get the point where we can actually have some movement. Now, what could be happening, and let me just quickly quell one of the concerns. I think it's very unlikely that it's any one of those transients that is causing, like for instance, a shake of the device, or if it, for instance, was bumped or fell. Those things would be transients, and we would filter those out in the processing. So what's most likely happening is we are actually seeing some, let's call it subclinical improvements in capabilities. Now, I like to call these things sort of base level functions, and they're kind of the foundations, right? It's the range of motion, it's potentially the increase in strength, force production, for instance. These are all prerequisites to building up to an actual function, right? If you don't have any range of motion, you don't have any strength, I don't care if you have the ability to control all your muscles perfectly, you will not be able to complete a task. And so we have to sort of build those individual components up and then layer on function. And one of the things that's really hard is that transition from those base level foundational skills to the actual functional tasks. And that's especially challenging if you start off with a lower level of capabilities. Going from something with very little to no active movement to some active movement is a big step. It's a non-linear step as compared to just having some function to, we'll say, refining it, for instance. Right. That step function is not the same. That first one is a doozy, as we may say. And so one thing I may ask is, are you guys doing additional tasks after using the Motus hand? Are you incorporating additional things like the functional tasks, for instance, outside of the device?
I would say there's very little of that. One of the constraints we've had with COVID is we're not allowed to be here, but an hour a day. They're trying to control the spread, and so we don't get to have much of an opportunity. They do have an occupation or a physical therapist that comes in once, I know once a week, sometimes twice a week, and they will do some things with her arm, but other than that, it pretty much sits flaccid. I mean, it doesn't get used.
Okay. So maybe what needs to happen is, I don't know the structure there, but if I was trying to problem solve this, what I might want to do is I might want to find one of the medical assistants or one of the care partners that's in the facility, and I might want to ask them to learn how to do the setup process. And what you could do is you could actually imagine starting 30 minutes before you were to show up. And that way you could get her to do a chunk of time, 30 minutes on the device, and then you would spend maybe the last 30 minutes with her, and then you could transition immediately to some functional stuff. I often really like to use that transition period to work on functional tasks. And it's something it's much easier to do in person. So it's very, very challenging to do these remotely. And I think it'd be easier to instruct the medical assistant how to put the device on, and then you to work with some functional things. And I think layering those tasks on top of the priming that is done with the device, right? You're getting the increased range of motion, you're getting some of that activation. You have a prime nervous system, and then you can effectively try to buttress on those tasks. And then you guys can get really creative about how to do this. And this is the strategy I use with almost all the patients I work with one-on-one. I don't want to spend the time working with them with the device, right? They've learned to do this themselves. I want to spend the time taking what that device can do for them and then translating that to something that really matters in the real world. That's the step. And this is where you can get really creative in using surfaces. I understand that this is really challenging if you don't have a lot of active movement, but find a smooth surface and work on just some simple tasks, right? Just try to do leaning, try to get some extensions and flexion, and then you'll be able to sort of see the real world consequences of the improvements there. With that being said, what we can do now is, I think we're kind of potentially running out of time here, but what we can do is we can actually do an assessment. I think this is the first time that we've worked together, but I very much like the opportunity to do assessments with people, because we can look at the actual data, we can look at the performance in real time, and then we can answer that question very, very explicitly. Is there active movement under basal conditions with no assistance? What's the passive range of motion? And what happens when we provide a little bit of assistance? Do we get any amplification of that movement? Because what could be happening is there, like I said, subclinical movements, right? You would not see this if you didn't have any assistance, right? You can imagine a limb being positioned like this, and because the effect of gravity is downward in this case, you may not actually generate enough force to visibly move the arm. But when we can actually provide assistance, we can overcome that effect of gravity and put her into a better position where the residual movements that he does have can actually emerge.
Yeah.
And so that could be one reason why it's hard to see it outside of the device, but inside a device we see movements.
Got it.
Because it has that capabilities.
Thanks for watching this video. If you have questions or would like to speak with me about how you can make functional gains from home, call or text me at 404-939-3476 or visit motusnova.com/contact.